Buenas and Hafa Day. The Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning is calling this informational hearing to order. Today is Wednesday, April 3rd. The time is now 9:07 a.m. In compliance with open government law, notices of today's hearing were published in the Guam Daily Post, provided via email to senators, stakeholders, and the local media, and posted it to the Government of Guam Public Notices website on Wednesday, March 24th, for the 5-day notice, and April 1st for the 48-hour notice. The purpose of today's hearing is to discuss the following agenda items: to receive updates on Guam EPA's Dieldrin regulations, updates on US EPA's proposed maximum contaminant levels, and also hazardous constituent proposed rules, as well as US EPA's open burn, open detonation regulations. To receive updates on Guam EPA's zero waste initiatives, the fund, and also to receive updates on other mandates such as the plastic bag ban, and to receive information regarding the status of the removal of waste and used oil from Guam. So just rules of conduct. As if senators were to come in, the panel will be recognized. Those speaking on the panel will first be recognized by the chair. Please state your name before speaking. Senators will be given an opportunity at the end of each panel to ask questions. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda, and no personal inference as to character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. So now to begin our agenda, so we can have the PowerPoint posted. So this is the info hearing, and next slide. And these are the agenda items, just as I was speaking earlier. And so the first item we're going to be focusing on is Dieldrin. Next slide. So back in January, we did have an oversight hearing on the status of the Northern Guam Lens Aquifer and the status of Guam's water resources. And so in one of the topics that was discussed was Dieldrin. And so just to recap, Dieldrin has been banned since the 1980s, so it was generally phased out eventually. The last allowed use was for termite control in the 80s, prior to it being banned in 1987. So Dieldrin is produced in the US, so it wasn't produced or manufactured in Asian countries. And so it was a surprise to see a surge of Dieldrin in our water wells recently. Actually, it's been testing positive for many years, and it wasn't until recent that US EPA provided some guidance. In fact, that there was a response that is needed. Okay, next slide. So there are 3 wells that have tested high. And so the detection level is below 0.2 parts per billion. And so in this particular well, D17 stands for Dedido, so this well is in Dedido. It's, as you can see on the map, it's in proximity to the Northern Community Health Center. And the level that it tested at was 0.34 parts per billion. So at this level, the risk of cancer is 1 in 10,000, and also it is toxic. It's a neurotoxic. The symptoms of neurotoxicity is manifests. The other well, next slide, that tested high was in Gigo, and this is a water producing well. Also, I think this is one of the highest ones. It's near Anderson Air Force Base. It tested at 1.61 parts per billion. The next slide shows the third, one of the top 3. This is the Manilao, a well situated in Manilao near Marbo Cave, testing at 0.23 parts per billion. So all of these levels are above would produce a risk of 1 in 10,000 for cancer. We did further studies, or we did a FOIA to find out what the other wells tested at. Next slide. And so these are the results that we got. There are various levels, and in addition to other chemicals in need of treatment. But the top three was the ones in Manilao, Dedido, and Chico. And so the reason for this info hearing was to find out what is the response that Guam EPA is planning to do. I think notification was one of the last topics we discussed. And I know during the oversight hearing, Guam Water Works Authority stated that they can deploy treatment to Manilao and Dedido rather quickly, but it would take up to a year for GEGO to get a treatment system in place. And so we're here to hear if there's anything that Guam EPA has in the works to protect the community in regards to Dieldrin. So I'd like to recognize Administrator Lastimosa.
Good morning, Madam Chair. So since last we spoke, Guam EPA actually has been working on a proposed interim action level for Dieldrin. We've actually had it in draft form since early January. We have engaged with USEPA'S senior toxicologist and his availability to come out so that we could then hold the public hearing to go over the interim action level plan. We've had some delays because of his unavailability for personal reasons, but the latest news is that he is expected to come out maybe May 1st, whereas we were hoping that he would come out sometime this month, but circumstances being as they are, he's expected to come the week of May 1st. And after that time, we will hold a public hearing for comment, but more importantly, to be able to answer questions the public may have regarding the interim action level plan.
Are you able to provide that information during this hearing?
It's still in draft form, so I mean, I suppose we could discuss it with the caveat that it is still draft and it's not finalized. So we do have 2 tiers, and if I could defer to Ms. Juliana Mendoza, who is with the Safe Drinking Water Program.
Absolutely.
To
okay, yeah. Good morning.
discuss that.
Thank you so much. You're recognized, Julie.
Good morning, Senator. My name is Juliana Mendoza. I am with the Guam EPA Safe Drinking Water Program, and I am the Environmental Health Specialist. So our proposed interim action level for Dieldrin, we have 2 tiers. One would be if the systems or the results had exceeded 0.2 parts per billion, then we're going to require this system to do a tier 2. That's required public notification to its customers within 30 days. Now, if the results for Dieldrin exceed 0.5 parts per billion, and then that will be considered a tier 1, which requires the public water systems to notify their customers within 24 hours. And again, the tier 1 and tier 2 is based on the health effects. And that's why it's important for our senior toxicologists from EPA Region 9 to discuss those health effects at those levels. Thank you.
Okay, so 0.2 parts per billion is the tier 2 and 0.5 parts per billion is tier 1?
Correct.
Okay, so this is much higher than what the risk. So from my understanding, if you can go to the next slide. Sorry, next slide. Next slide again. Yeah, so in the last discussion, what was discussed was that the 0.002 to 0.2 is the 1 to 1 million risk of cancer, whereas anything greater than 0.2 increases the risk to 1 in 10,000. And during that discussion, US EPA guidance was that the 1 to 1 million to 1 to 10,000 is the acceptable risk. So I guess I'm kind of concerned that they're going at a higher level. Yeah, I think that's something. Was there any discussion regarding that? Why is it being placed at a higher level versus a lower level?
So for the 0.5, is specifically, it's an average dieldrin concentration that, you know, exceeds the short-term health advisory. Let me look at my, it's what we decided was because it's a short-term consumption of water with dieldrin levels above this concentration have been associated with increased likelihood of adverse impacts to the liver and nervous system. So the 0.2 is like a lower level. It's a long-term consumption of water containing dieldrin. Above this increases the likelihood of developing cancer and cancer above the acceptable levels. So the 0.5 is one up to it being, you know, cancer level. You know, at that level, there's an adverse impacts to the liver and nervous system. So it all boils down to the health effects of these levels.
Okay, so that, I guess this is something, I mean, I'm hoping that, I wish we can speed up the process, and if there's any measures that can be taken ahead of the establishment of these action levels. So yeah, something that we need to follow up with GWA. Of course, apparently the rules set the actions, the corrective action that needs to be done. But I mean, considering that we already know this information, this chemical has been banned. I mean, is there anything that can be done now? So what information can you, I guess, considering that, it almost seems that the public needs to take it into their own hands to make sure that they're, you know, if the water, if they're not, there's no current regulations in place. I mean, what can the public do at this point to?
Well, at this
ensure?
point, I mean, at this point, you know, we're going to advise that they purchase water with treatment. And when I say that, when I say treatment, you know, treatment using additional treatment as in granular activated carbon filtration, or a water vending machine or water company that uses a granular activated carbon filtration.
Okay, and then also reverse osmosis.
And the RO,
Right,
reverse osmosis,
and ion
exchange.
Yeah, so I know there are water vendors out there that do that, but again, they haven't been tested either. So, and they rely on the municipal water supply. So yeah, I think yes, there are additional measures that can be done at this point to make sure that they're protected. But you know, if we can maybe expedite the process, that would be good. But May 2nd, you said? May
1st, the week of May 1st.
Okay. Okay. All right. Is there any other information that you would like to provide regarding Dieldrin? So the hearing is going to be on May 1st?
So we need to confirm that with USEPA'S senior toxicologist as to his travel availability, but that's the date that he proposed. Okay. So as soon as we get confirmation on that, we'll schedule the public hearing.
Okay. What about Zoom? I mean, if you can set it up virtually, so that way it can facilitate.
That is something that we discussed.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes, well, the discussion that we had was sometimes it's, you know, just better reception, you know, when it's in person as opposed to virtual. But we have discussed a virtual option.
Okay. Yeah, because that would expedite the process further. Okay. And then as far as public comment, how long will that public comment period? I believe, is it 45 days?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay. And from that point, how quickly can Guam EPA establish that?
So if there's no opposition to the current draft, then the draft will move forward.
Okay.
So
and
unless
then-
there are any objections to any of the language in the draft interim action plan, I'll push it forward immediately.
Okay, and then in GWA, they're ready to move on this? Have you reached out with that to them?
I can't.
So GWA, they are aware, and so in the meantime, once the interaction level becomes, or once it's passed, we will work with them. We will reevaluate their samples and do the recalculation and make that determination of those wells that needs further assessment. That it also includes issuing a public notification to its customers and working with them for a treatment, additional treatment process.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so the next item we're going to be talking about is PFAS. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, PFAS. We know it exists on Guam ever since the first, I think, UCMR, the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule 3, I believe, which occurred in 2015, but the results didn't come, I guess, weren't released till 2016, or we weren't, I think publicly, we weren't aware until 2016. And so PFAS is found in many commercial products. So we find them because of its characteristics as being oil resistant and other things. It makes it a very appealing product for manufacturers. Unfortunately, there's a lot of health effects that come with that, and and that a lot of that happened prior to the knowledge of its toxicity. On Guam, so we've been exposed to it for many decades, considering it's used in firefighting foam. It was heavily used in firefighting foam by the military, and then also it was used by our local department, fire department, but to the greater extent by the military. I believe there's been changes in the specifications of the firefighting foam. So what happened was they changed out the PFAS to something that is shorter chain, but only to find out that that shorter chain is also toxic. And so that is going to take some time, I believe, to really kind of remove the PFAS. Or if you can provide information regarding that. Do you have any additional information regarding the firefighting foam and its constituents to be PFAS-free at this point?
Senator, I'm sorry, we do not have that information or did not receive updated information on the firefighting foam.
Okay. Right, and a lot of these are required by FAA, so these are requirements, and unfortunately that is going to take time. But fortunately, Guam Airport Authority, they agreed to, I guess they were in the practice prior to it becoming known as an emerging contaminant. They were using it in testing, and it would not be handled as a hazardous product. And so it was left in the environment. But now they are agreeing to not test it. So there are other ways of testing their equipment without having to release the firefighting foam. So that's a good change. So some of the issues with PFAS, so a lot of developmental effects occurs. There's also some of the PFAS can also cause cancer, known to cause cancer. And so PFAS consists of a large family of chemicals. So maybe if you can discuss, so some of the reasons why the changes are being made to regulations is because it affects the most vulnerable of our populations, so those that are developing in the womb, as well as it being tied to cancer as well, so many different kinds of cancer. It is also tied to also hypertension for those that are pregnancy-induced hypertension, and a whole host of effects. So it affects the endocrine system, which affects a lot of things in our body. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, and so one of the problems with PFAS, it accumulates in the body, and therefore can continually, individual can be exposed to the effects as it accumulates in one's body, and it can lead to all these health effects. And so what US EPA has done is they have already closed the comment period for setting the MCLs. And so if you can maybe talk about that, Julia, about the MCLs and what to expect as far as Guam EPA is concerned.
Thank you, Senator. So the proposed PFAS regulations, we're still waiting a final ruling to determine the MCLs. What is proposed is for the PFOA is 4 parts per trillion. For PFOS is 4 parts per trillion for MCL. And then we do have the hazard index as well, which is the MCL is 1, it's unit less. The latest update, just to give you that update, is that as of March 27, Office of Management and Budget at headquarters did the final review of the PFAS regulations, and they were returned to EPA that the agency can sort out the actual release date. So we're hoping or anticipating the week of April 8 or April 15 for the final rule of the proposed PFAS.
Anticipate the level's going to change?
It's not going to change.
Okay.
So what we're looking at is, again, for PFOA is 4 parts per trillion. For PFOS is 4 parts per trillion for the MCL.
Okay, and then as far as remediation, what are the, if it's a utility needs to remediate, what is the available technology?
So the available technology, it would also be the granular activated carbon, or RO, reverse osmosis, or ion exchange.
Okay. Yes, and again, in the oversight, GWA, they're already planning to, I guess, streamline their treatment because it's not cost effective to have a treatment for every well. And so they're trying to figure out a different approach to that. Their assessment, so if we want to go to the next slide. So just to recap, these are the MCLs, proposed MCLs that will become effective shortly, probably in April, and next week, by next week potentially. And so originally, just to give an idea, currently it's 70 parts per trillion. So that's the health advisory limit. Is 70 parts per trillion. Now it's brought down to 4 parts per trillion. So it's a huge drop. And we know, like states like New Jersey, they've already implemented lower MCLs at 20, but this is even much lower. So it's considerably lower. And then, of course, the health index, the hazard index, for 4 other PFAS or any mixtures thereof. And so next slide. So GWA is already planning to treat the wells. So again, this is going to take some time because they still need to design and to implement it. I believe there's a compliance timeline. Do you know anything about that? Any information about compliance?
It'll be 2 years.
2 years, okay. So again, I think the public probably, it would be good to have water that's been treated. So if there's vendors out there that can accomplish that. But again, those vendors we need to know, because they rely on municipal water for the most part, that we're not even sure that is sufficient.
Correct. Senator, just to give a little bit background, the Safe Drinking Water Program staff and in collaboration with US EPA Region 9 had conducted, and as well with Public Health, we conducted over 130 water vending machine and water companies back in June, right after Typhoon Marwar. We did the survey for each water vending machine, and they do hold a filtration, GAG system or filtration RO system. And so that would be the alternative to get water if they're not able to get the water from GWA.
Okay, and I know in the bill or the law that we recently passed, Guam EPA can set regulations. So is that something that is in the works with Guam EPA regarding water vendors?
So after that assessment, after Typhoon Mawar, we did see a gap in the regulation, whereas these water vending machines and water distributors were under the purview of the Department of Public Health and Social Services, Division of Environmental Health. And for Guam EPA, our authority and purview is prior to entering those water treatment systems. So there has been discussion in-house whether or not we would test those systems as part of our authority. Currently, it's not part of our authority to test water from those systems, and we don't know whether or not that would maybe impede on the authority of public health, but that has been a discussion in-house. So that we would then test those 130 water distribution systems as part of our compliance and enforcement.
Yeah, so I mean, again, the regulations, you are authorized to create regulations. Considering that this emerging contaminant has now become regulated, it would seem that this would be the appropriate direction to also include the water vendors to ensure the safety of the drinking water to the public. I mean, even though they have the requisite treatment, the confidence that the water is actually treated adequately enough, that I think is important. Okay. All right, so the next item is the PFAS. If you can go to the next slide. So the other rule that's being created by US EPA is called the listing. It's under RCRA, Resource Conservation Recovery Act, listing of certain PFAS, 9 PFAS constituents as hazardous constituents. So this is different from listing them as hazardous chemicals. So as a slide shows, it really impacts only the corrective action. If you correct me if I'm wrong, but it impacts the corrective action when there's cleanup involved. Are there other effects of this listing? So it would impact basically hazardous waste facilities, and according to the proposed regulations, it doesn't affect public water systems like sewage, because we know PFAS is present in sewage, and it will not potentially affect, so for instance, Guam Solid Waste Authority. It seems to be limited in scope to the hazardous waste facilities, and these are the 9 different PFAS constituents that are listed. Has Guam EPA, are you going to provide input, or has US EPA sought your feedback on this?
Hi, this is Roland Gutierrez. I'm the Air and Land Program Administrator for the Guam Environmental Protection Agency. So we do have an association of states and territory solid waste management officials. There's a committee that is addressing those issues, and we work through that committee. Unfortunately, there's one representative from each region, and so we're not part of that committee, but we put our input into those meetings. We're having our mid-year meeting at the end of this month, and I'm sure we'll get an update on how it's going to affect our hazardous waste facilities.
Okay, because there is a public comment period, so if you can go to the next slide. There is still time to look through the proposed rule and see if there are any changes that Guam EPA would like to recommend as it pertains to Guam. So this is the information, and so this is open to the public as well, if they would like to also provide their input. So it's the comment period ends next week, April 9th. And so we have the link there if anybody wants to read it and provide their comments. Okay, next slide. So the next item on the agenda is the open burn, open detonation regulations. And so this has been a long time coming, right? And ever since Congress banned open burn, open detonation since the 1980s, but left a very small exemption for waste explosives. They never intended to be an indefinite exemption, basically up until there was new technology that can handle waste explosives. And so there are two permitting authorities. There's the permits under subpart X, and there's the interim facilities. So there's permitted facilities, interim facilities that are permitted under RCRA. So the problem with open burn, open detonation, everybody knows it doesn't get rid of the contaminant if there's not a full combustion, if combustion process is not complete. And especially with PFAS being regulated, it would, the effect that open burn, open detonation has, it disperses it even more. In addition to all these other hazardous chemicals, PCBs, dioxins, all of these cause cancer and other health effects. Also, it's been shown that, so EPA has documented that these contaminants accumulate in the soil. So even after closure process has taken place with a closed facility, they are finding levels that exceed the resident levels. So this, again, I think a lot of the discussion regarding the efforts by myself and others to ban open burn and to phase out open detonation, a lot of the discussion that took place in this past year somehow was filtered into these regulations, it seems. So if I can maybe go through some of them and we can have this dialogue and maybe your understanding of what these proposed regulations are. The public will get the opportunity to also put in their comments, and I believe there's a seminar that's coming up April 18th for the public to get more information regarding this. So this is huge. So next slide. So since it was banned in the 80s, 2/3 of the OBOD facilities have closed down. There are 67 left that are operating. And so it's interesting to see that of the 67, 24 have actually evaluated alternative technologies. Of those 24, 13 have used alternative technologies. 11 have concluded that there are no safe alternatives. 41 have not conducted evaluations. So this was actually required in existing regulations already to begin with. Next slide. So some of the new things that are being proposed, so they're adding different sections to these parts. Part 264, 40 CFR Part 264, and then 40 CFR 265. And so what this is, it really expands the last memorandum that was released in June of 2022. It goes into a lot more detail. And so it's authorized by RCRA as well as the hazardous waste amendments, hazardous and solid waste amendments of 1984. The estimated cost is about 6.3 to 28 million annually. Some of the things that are new, it proposes permitting mobile treatment units. There's new subparts for cleanup, closure, and even emergency permits. There is proposed exemption for de minimis treatment. Next slide. So all of this, EPA is actually encouraging the public to provide any input. So this is kind of like the overview of what the proposed OBOD regulations include. So it talks about how and when operators and permit authorities are to evaluate treatment technologies, how it will be demonstrated whether they are safe and available. So those are the two criteria that they're going to require, is whether the treatment technology is safe and available. And so we'll go into that a little bit more detail. It also goes into the timelines for implementation. It does allow for continuation of OBOD prior to implementation of the safe alternative. It requires even more detailed waste analysis. So currently in RCRA, they already require waste analysis, but this one is in more detailed. They're actually proposing for every individual waste stream rather than grouping waste streams together. It also goes into talking about what's prohibited by OBOD. Also providing more clarification regarding technical standards. There is also clarification on emergency permitting as well as mobile treatment units. So one thing it does not cover is munitions nuclear weapons, nuclear devices, and non-nuclear components. So that is covered under the Atomic Energy Act. So EPA basically does not consider those weapons, those type of devices, but they highly encourage that alternatives be utilized. So that's their position. In regards to CERCLA, so they don't propose any changes to, so no exemptions, although some commenters want exemptions from CERCLA. The proposed rule does not have that. Next slide. Sorry, next slide again. Going too fast. And then next slide. The other thing is the de minimis. So what is the current, maybe if you can explain, what is the current, so we only have one permitted facility on Guam, is that correct? Which is Anderson Air Force Base?
Yes, it is correct.
Okay. And so what is the permit request? What was their permit request for the total amount of new net explosive weight?
I currently don't have that information on me, but I can provide that to you, Senator.
Okay. Because one of the things this rule is proposing is exemption for de minimis. And they're listing a de minimis as 15,000 pounds of net explosive weight. And so as long as there are three things that this facility must demonstrate. That there's negligible contamination and negligible potential for exposure. Two, that their treatment with a mobile treatment unit or off-site alternative technology is not available or safe. And third is the facility does not have unresolved compliance issues. Again, this exemption does not exempt non-explosive waste, which has never been, that was banned since the 1980s, right? So it doesn't change that. Next slide. And even if they got the de minimis exemption, it does not exempt them from closure requirements. So the demonstration has to satisfy the director or the administrator's concerns, environmental concerns. There's proposal for a 5-year frequency of review, reevaluation, and should there be any threat to human health, they would have to, the owner-operator would have to notify the director within 5 days. Okay, next slide. So that 15,000 pounds of net explosive weight is annual, and it could potentially include not just, it could include the objects that are contaminated in the proximity of that weapon. So it could include, for instance, if there was construction debris, that might be included in the weight, total weight. So which would lower the net explosive weight, potentially. So when looking at this slide, are there any comments, any thoughts about the de minimis proposed rule?
I guess we would have to see whether or not the permitted facility exceeds that 15,000-pound de minimis threshold and how that impacts them. And if not, then that exemption wouldn't apply to them.
Yeah, but
I'm assuming.
are there concerns with that level of 15,000 pounds annually for Guam?
I guess without knowing what their capacity or what their annual throughput has been, I can't say.
So I can say, Senator, their request in the permit is over 15,000 pounds, but the last meeting that we had with them, it looked like they were averaging about 600 pounds of detonation material per month. So what they asked for and what they're actually doing may be two different things, but obviously it's going to be based on the permit request, and if they're requesting over 15,000, which they currently are, then they would not fall into that requirement. They would have to either modify their permit request to get an actual, because they always plan for worst case scenario. So they always go for the highest number. Whether or not they actually explode or detonate that material to that amount, it's two different things. But I can get you actual figures for both what they currently exploded or detonated last year and what they currently request.
Yeah, and just to also think about, this doesn't include the emergency explosions, right? So this is on top of that, and I believe in one of our discussions, there's a lot more of that happening, is the emergency side. So if we're thinking about cumulative impacts of this.
Yeah, Senator, we need to read the rule whether or not emergency explosions are part of the actual facility explosions.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Correct.
for your information, we just exploded some material at the University of Guam and the Marine Lab 2 weeks ago that were left over from their chemistry labs. It was picric acid and some other materials that were unsafe to move. So they detonated them in a container and also in a foxhole down at the Marine Lab.
So it was open detonated?
It was open detonated. As an emergency action under CERCLA.
What was the compound?
Picric acid.
Okay, and so basically it was kind of near the ocean? You said
It was in a
foxhole.
hole.
It was in a hole.
And the other one was in a container.
How far away was it from the ocean?
I was not there. They wouldn't let us go down there. It wasn't my staff that attended, but no one was allowed down at the Marine Lab.
When did this take place?
2 weeks ago.
How about the neighbors? I mean, there's people that live nearby. Were they
The notifications
notified?
were done through Homeland.
Okay, so were they notified prior?
Homeland took care of all of the notifications for that. We weren't part of the notification process.
And how often does that happen?
That was a one-time event. So what happened was after Typhoon Mawar, US EPA dedicated a certain amount of funding to remove any old waste from the island, and they've spent $6 million removing waste from the island that would potentially cause harm to both the public and the community.
Okay, because my understanding is that So it was open detonated. So was there a charge that was added to that?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, so according to this, there are certain chemicals that cannot be open burn.
Yeah, it was
Other-
not burnt.
So, and I think OD too, I'm not sure if that's also included, whether chemicals can be open detonated or to what
Yeah, I would have to
extent.
check with them.
Okay. All right. So the other thing, next slide. So the other thing to demonstrate as far as whether it meets de minimis regarding negligible contamination is the known and anticipated toxicity of byproducts, the degree to which these chemicals bioaccumulate in the environment and in wildlife, humans, as well as are there other materials that are going to be contaminated by it. So PPEs, they definitely say there is poorly suited for open burn because of the amount of smoke it creates. Construction debris too. So this is what this proposed rule covers, and something which the public can weigh in on. Next slide. The other thing it talks about is how to, whether the demonstration for de minimis would be accepted is the extent to the location of the OBOD treatment, impacts to nearby resources, sensitive environments, if it's close to population centers or near floodplains, aquifers, and floodplains. Next slide. Again, with de minimis, they would have to show, sorry, did you want to add to that? Okay. Another demonstration that would be needed, could be added to this de minimis exemption, or at least approval of it, is that there are permit controls. So OBOD are generally not controlled, but this idea of controlling it when, let's say if it's less windy or not windy at all, the combustion temperatures. So this is something that's part of that. Next slide. The other thing is a demonstration that the mobile treatment unit or anything off-site is not available, safe or available for the items that to be treated. So do you know much about the mobile treatment units coming online?
So there was a presentation by USEPA several months ago. I think we were part of that webinar where they talked about the mobile treatment units. I don't know whether or not that's going to be incorporated into this facility's operation plan. But again, we are working closely with USEPA's permitting section for RCRA, and we'll see how they incorporate those conditions into the new permit. I think one of the main condition is for the facility to evaluate those alternative technologies. I don't believe that we're going to mandate the use of alternative technologies until they've conducted their own facility assessment.
Yeah, okay, so there are stuff in the proposed rule that would, they're proposing to limit or restrict or prohibit certain things from which OBOD can be used for. So
I know that with the new permit, they're going to completely eliminate open burn. I think the facility has agreed to eliminate open burn, so that's not going to be part of this new permit. Also, in addition to what was mentioned in your slides, in the 30 years that this facility has been in operation, all the groundwater monitoring reports have not indicated any contamination or exceedances of any contaminant level.
Yeah, in the proposed rule, it does talk about that the sampling requirements are challenging because it's not contained. And so that's the problem with the reporting of that. I feel that it's not robust enough and it didn't take place during the time of explosions. And so there, in the proposed rule, it does talk about proper sampling to determine the actual release of contaminants.
So that's what we're working also with USEPA. And so they've been listed, we don't have a current hydrogeologist, and we don't have our own risk assessor. So we've been listed, the USEPA, they've committed to put together, like you said, a more robust groundwater and surface water monitor sampling plan, and also a more robust soil sampling plan. And that's going to be part of the requirements for the new permit. And so they're going to put together their recommendations, and then Anderson will have time to put together a more robust monitoring program, and then it will be reviewed and incorporated into the permit.
Okay, yeah, and it also includes air sampling. So if you look at the proposed regulations, it does talk about air sampling.
Yes, they've mentioned that also to require air sampling. So that'll also be part of the requirements for the regulations. I mean, for the permit, I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, okay, so next slide. So you did talk about compliance record, but, sorry, did you do that before? So maybe, okay. Yeah, you did talk about compliance record. That was a third thing that needs to be demonstrated, but considering that the measurements were not, or the sampling methods were not robust enough, and that was mentioned in the proposed rule as well, as far as the difficulty of actually getting a true measurement. So this next slide talks about EPA is actually encouraging comment about the level that is being set. And so this is for the public, the main public, as well as Guam EPA. So some of the things, should EPA specify maximum waste quantity criteria for different waste streams? This is something that they're asking the public to weigh in. Should EPA provide an exemption at a smaller annual limit, 5,000 versus 15,000? And should waste be excluded from the de minimis? So these are things that EPA is actively asking public comment on. Okay, next slide. So the other element is waste characterization. So before you even get to determining what alternatives, you have to know what waste is there. And this is already required in RCRA, but they're basically proposing a much more detailed analysis. So like I said earlier, they were basically, instead of grouping different waste streams, they want a more detailed information about each waste product. Because that could also determine what technology to use and the suitability of it. Okay, sorry. So next slide. Again, the waste characterization also would cover construction debris, anything in the proximity of the explosive that can be contaminated and then become explosive itself. So that needs to be characterized as well. And so they're looking at the physical description, chemical constituent analysis, chemical properties, so how does it react? If there's any material safety data sheets, known information already. Also, if it's aging, degrading, that also needs to be identified. Next slide. And so this goes into a lot of detail. So there's more information from the proposed rule. And the important thing is to evaluate available alternatives based on these individual waste streams. Next slide. One of the things EPA is specifically asking for a comment is requesting a comment regarding how best to balance the protection of sensitive or classified information with a duty to provide a meaningful public involvement through the public notice and comment process. So again, a lot of these constituents probably are not going to be made available to the public. So how do we make sure that, they're not being exposed to these harmful chemicals? And how do we, I guess, convey that information and include this in this proposed rule? Any comments on that?
So I just asked Roland whether or not they provide us a list of I guess, the munitions, but they do? So they provide it in the permit application.
Yeah, so but the things like PFAS, so things that aren't, let's say, the explosive component, but there's other chemicals in there. So I think that, the PFAS situation needs to be controlled. I mean, we know that a lot of the munitions contain PFAS. And now, they're being allowed to use it, but on our end, we have to clean it up. So what is that? I mean, I think that needs to be addressed straight off.
Okay, that's something we'll bring up with permitting and how that factors into the permit conditions that we'll put in the new permit.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's the tension here is, we don't necessarily know what's in these munitions, and only to find out decades later that it has these chemicals that are in our environment. And so I think it's really, we need to be very careful when, when we're creating these comments to a proposed rule such as this. We want the most protective type of rule available and not basically enable the contamination of our environment, right? And I believe, the previous admiral was stating that, really the facility may not even be needed because a lot of what they've been treating were expired munitions. Has EPA confirmed that? What is being treated there? Is it expired munitions, which can, potentially be shipped off prior, in a safe way? So the other thing is safe transport. So I think the proposed rule doesn't necessarily highlight that specifically, but I think that could be one of the recommendations. Okay, do you have any comments at this point regarding the information?
We'll just look into those concerns that you have, Senator,
Okay, thank
and
you.
get back to you.
Next slide. So initial screening, so one of the things that these permitted facilities would have to do is they have to do initial screening of alternative technologies based on their waste characterization. One of the things that was made very clear in the proposed rule is that cost-related criteria should not remove technology from consideration. I think that's really critical. Next slide. So the mandatory criteria they're looking at is safe and available. So this is something that we were discussing earlier with legislation. And there was also concern about, safety is obviously, it's not going to impact those that are handling it. Safety also encompasses the environmental safety as well. Availability, so that's another term that was that brought a cause of concern because what's available in the States, what's their definition of available, right? What's available in the States may not be available here, so it may never be implemented. These alternate technologies may never be implemented. According to the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Mathematics, as well as the UN, they basically state that most of the military weapons, the majority of the weapons, alternative technology can be applied. They estimate that of the stockpile inventory in the U.S., 4% cannot be because of its unstable nature. So they do recognize, though, that most can be treated with all technology. Okay, next slide. The identification. So once the screen is done, the owner-operator would have to indicate which technology or combination of technology. So there are a series of treatments. So they see it as a multi-step process and not just one treatment fits all, right? Okay, next slide. There's also I think this is where the safe transport comes in. So to what extent can off-site treatment be used, or the use of mobile treatment units? So these are things that are being proposed. Next slide. So again, this is about identifying individual waste streams and not grouping them into one lump. Next slide. Okay, so these are just more information regarding evaluation for alternate technology. There could be potential exemptions in the case of, let's say, alternative technology is not maintained or breaks down. There could be a potential exemption for use of OD. This is what this proposed rule is proposing. Next slide. In regards to comments, so these are things that EPA is actually inviting the public to comment on, in addition to the whole proposed rule. The demonstration of eligibility. I guess they want the public to weigh in on that. Demonstrating eligibility to use OBOD, as well as the demonstration of eligibility to use safe technologies that are safe and available. As well as cost estimate and analysis. So they're also looking at that. Next slide. So it states in the proposed rule, the description of the facility operations, characterization of waste, initial screening of potential alternative technologies, identification of alternative technologies according to waste stream, also selected alternative technology. So all of basically they're requesting any comments in any part of this proposed rule. Okay, maybe we'll jump a couple slides over. So the other thing they would like a comment on is the exemption. So if owners and operators of these facilities, what are the exemptions when in the cases where I guess they're allowing, this proposed rule allows for implementation, the continued allowance of OBOD prior to implementation and evaluation. They also, US EPA recognizes it may take up to 10 years for alt technology to be used, but the agency can also initiate modifications in the permit as well. Okay, can we jump to the safe slide? So that's slide 48. Okay, next. And next one. So this is their definition of safe. Safe means a technology that must be designed, constructed, and operated in a manner that is safe for waste to be treated, and that appropriate procedures and technologies are used to ensure safe handling and treatment and appropriate safeguards for worker safety as determined by explosive specialists. Safe refers to the protection of human health, so it can also refer to the protection of human health and the environment when considering the technology's treatment byproducts. Protectiveness in this sense would be evaluated during the permitting process when the appropriate standards are developed. So this is what's being proposed. Also safe is the ability to monitor operations and treatment of byproducts, and the capability to treat toxic byproducts are critical factors to assure protectiveness. So this is what their mandatory criteria would be, or what, at least what they propose it to be. So the next criteria would be available. So that's next slide. So they did offer a process. It's called Adapting Technical Readiness Assessment Process, as a way to address availability. They also indicate that there's other ways, so treatability study and the research development and demonstration permit. So these are models that can be used as far as availability is concerned. Okay. So the other thing is timing and compliance, so we can jump to timing and compliance. So these are things in the proposed rule. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so this is where it states that, so they're adding language to the current regulations. It states that owner-operator of an existing OBOD unit would be required to conduct initial evaluation or reevaluation and submit it as part of their permit application. And they also state it could potentially be up to 10 years, but the agency can modify the permits as they're authorized. So currently, what is the current status of the Anderson Air Force Base permit application? Because it was supposed to be renewed in 2021, is that correct? So what is the status of that one?
I'm sorry, so the permit actually went through the comment period, and there were no comments on it, and it became effective that date, but we pulled it back because of the concerns regarding no all tech that was done. So right now, we're going to work with USEPA, as I said previously, once the rule comes out, and we make the determination of the time frame that if they must and how long it would take them to do an alternative.
Sorry, Roland.
Yes, ma'am.
So my understanding was it was not renewed. So you're saying it has been renewed?
Well, the whole process, if I'm not mistaken, the whole process was done through the public comment period. We had the public comment period. There were no comments that were issued, and then the permit should have became effective. But at this point in time, they're going on the permit that they've previously had as part of the law that states that if a timely submission of a permit is submitted until such time that we issue a new permit, then they would work off of the regulations the permit conditions that were in the previous permit, which is pretty much the same as what they have right now, that was issued after the public comment period. So right now, because of the concerns of the permit, we are reevaluating the permit conditions, and we're going to set new monitoring specifications, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure what the time frame is that they're going to rely on, but from the discussions that we've had with the US EPA as part of the permit, I believe we were intending, depending on what the rule comes out to say, was to give them 2 years to conduct that alternative technology evaluation. So that was the last thing that we discussed with US EPA. They currently have gone through a change in management for their senior permit management official. So we're working with a new person to finish the monitoring guidelines that we're going to recommend to them. And secondly, we're waiting for the actual rule to come out in regards to the alternative technology.
Okay, so let me see if I get this straight. The permit was accepted and approved in 2021?
Yes. So it went through the whole process. The permit came in, we wrote the, with the assistance of US EPA, we wrote the actual permit that went out for public comment and review. The public comment review period was 45 days. There was no public comments. After the 45 days, if there are no significant requests for technical inadequacy, then the permit would be issued. So, I mean, on paper, the permit is issued, but we've also pulled it back and advised them that we're going to reevaluate the permit conditions and institute new conditions, and we're actually going to go out for a new public comment period once we finish the draft permit for the review, and that will be announced through the public comment process. And after the 45-day public comment period, we'll once again, because we did have a public hearing at our office, and nobody showed up to the public hearing that we had. And so the transcript, the whole public comment
So are you
notice
talking about the
process-
2021, or
Yes.
is there a recent
No,
draft?
2021,
Okay, so that's a 3-year permit, is that correct?
I believe so.
When does that expire?
Should expire 21.
Should have
22,
expired
23,
already.
24, should expire this year.
So there wasn't any additional permit request?
No,
After
it didn't
this-
expire yet, because they would have issued they would have requested a new permit. And through our
So-
understanding, we are going to issue a new permit for this. And I mean, we're going to go out to actually and change the conditions. And once you change any significant changes in the permit, so the law states that whether the permit is in place or not, if there are significant changes that the administrator deems necessary for human health and environment, he can put in new permit conditions. But as part of that new permit conditions, basically, we have to go out through the whole public comment period and notice process.
Okay, Administrator, is it true or not that so the permit is a 3-year permit, is that correct?
That is correct, but like Roland said, it had gone through the renewal process, but the permit was not issued. We pulled it back. And so there's a permit condition in the old permit that expired in 2021 that says until we issue a new permit, the permittees shall abide by the permit conditions of the old permit. So in essence, all the permit conditions from prior to the 2021 permit is still valid. So until we issue, or still in effect rather, so until we issue the new permit, which we're working with USEPA to issue, those conditions still stand.
Okay, so basically the permit's expired, but because EPA stepped in and is basically allowing the old permit to have an effect, even though
So
the
it's still-
renewal period is already up.
Right, so it still validates those permit conditions. So even though the permit itself is technically expired, because we haven't issued the new permit, and until we issue the new permit, they still have to, it still holds them or binds them to the previous permit conditions of the previous permit.
Okay, so what is holding up the permit?
These new requirements.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that we incorporate these new regulations into this new permit that would basically allow for the reevaluation of alternative technologies and the strengthening of the monitoring regulations in the new permit.
So how close are they to completing that evaluation? Because they had it since 2021. So have you been updated on any kind of evaluations that they have done since 2021?
We do have monthly meetings with the US EPA in regards to the permit conditions that are being developed, or the recommendations for the monitoring program, and we should be done soon. The problem with that is there's a number of things. Is basically personnel changes at US EPA and getting the technical assistance that we need in order to put together the recommendations for their monitoring program.
Okay, but what is Anderson doing as far as demonstrating that they are evaluating
We advise
alternatives?
them as a ahead of putting out the regulations that they should start doing evaluations of all and waste characterizations for the munitions that they detonate.
So you haven't received any information of any type of evaluation from Anderson?
No, we have not.
Okay, have they indicated that they are?
They have expressed that they are going to do evaluations for all of the wastes that they intend to detonate or they currently have in stock that are intended to be detonated. They've made that, well, not a promise, but they've said that they would do it. I mean, it's a positive.
Okay, what is EPA doing in response to that? Because you are the authority, you have the authority to hold them accountable. Is that satisfactory that they haven't moved on any type of evaluation?
Well, the new permit would require that they conduct that evaluation for alternative technologies. And like Roland said, you know, there is a good faith effort for them to look at that, that option. And it seems like they're willing to do that, but I guess, you know, without a permit condition that dictates that they have to conduct the evaluation, you know, really at this point, it's going to be voluntary until the permit condition says otherwise. But as Roland has stated, it looks like there's a good faith effort to move in that direction. And knowing that the permit condition will require it, and then the time frame will be indicated in the permit, which is what, 2 years? Which will give them a 2-year, you know, I guess a 2-year time frame to conduct that evaluation. But it seems that they're willing to do that.
One of the things we've discussed with them is through their association that we work with in regards to this hazardous waste is that there, like you said, indicated, there have been other studies from other open debt areas, and we've, you know, instructed them, you know, you're all one DOD, to not reinvent the wheel, but to go back and see if that there are the types of munitions that you're going to detonate that have already been evaluated, so that you can speed the process up. And so we're getting copies of those reports to them so that they can conduct those analysis.
Yeah, to me, that's not satisfactory to have these, what is it, 2-3 years go by. They know it's coming. They know evaluations are needed. Nothing has happened. And EPA is not asking them to do that or requiring them of it. It seems business as usual. This is something the proposed rule really, I mean, it already exists in our regulations that OBOD facilities have to look at alternatives. It doesn't require this new proposed rule to do that. And why isn't EPA doing that?
You mean requiring them to
Look at alternatives, yes. It already exists in law. Why is EPA not doing it?
I guess, you know, what would require them to do it is the permit. So because we're still in draft form on the permit, until that becomes final, it's not something that is mandated. I mean, I certainly, you know, that's the permit condition for which they're going to operate, and we haven't issued that permit yet, but we're working on that. And like Roland said, we're hoping to accomplish that soon.
Yeah, the thing is that, you know, EPA has given them, Guam EPA has given them this lag phase, a whole permit cycle with no action. That to me is not good faith. How is that good faith? To ignore a complete permit cycle and not do any kind of evaluation that's currently required by regulation. What is happening with EPA?
I don't have an answer for you right now, Senator, but I can get you an answer soon and tell you what our actual mandatory, if we can mandatorily do it right now or not.
Well, there are 24 other facilities that have, of those that are operating in the U.S. They've actually done that work. Okay, I'd like to recognize Senator Kanata. Thank you for being here today. Do you have any questions at this point? Okay. All right, so what about expired munitions? Have you had that conversation about? So this is something that previous Admiral Nicholson stated that a lot of these munitions at Anderson Air Force Base is detonating are expired munitions which could be safely transported. Have you followed up that conversation at all?
Senator, unfortunately, our program manager, acting program manager is out sick today, and our actual program manager is on medical leave. So I don't have an answer for you at the moment, but I can get you an answer.
All right. Okay, so just to, yeah, so going back to this, there's definitely opportunities for Guam EPA to limit or at least phase out a lot of these detonation, even from the military themselves that have suggested it. Admiral Nicholson, former Admiral Nicholson even suggested a huge opportunity. And this is something that Guam EPA, I believe, really should be at the forefront of advocating. All right, so just for the public, I wanted to, if we go down to the public comment slide on this section. So just, there's a lot more that can be presented on these proposed rules. There's a lot of opportunities for the public to weigh in. Yeah, I can go down some more to the, I think it's slide 81. 81, yeah. So the comment period for this rule ends May 21st. We do encourage the public to look at the documents. It's close to 300 pages long. There is going to be a seminar, I believe, April 18th, and my office can provide that information for those that want to be part of the seminar to get more information and to be able to provide their comments. The next item on the agenda, we're going to move on. We're going to pivot to the next item, which is zero waste. So if we could just go to that slide. Okay, so prior to this informational hearing, I did ask for an expenditure report for the Recycling Revolving Fund. Are you able to provide that to the committee?
If we can move on, I'll get that in just 5 minutes.
Okay. So yeah, maybe I could talk about the Zero Waste Act, which was passed last term. And so in that act, basically, it reprogrammed the Recycling Revolving Fund to include more zero waste initiatives, also to increase the capacity for the removal of a lot of these recycling, the first, second, and third priority listing, what's listed. The other thing that the Zero Waste Act did was it basically pushed for the targets of 50% reduction of waste by 2035 and 75% by 2045. Based on the Zero Waste Master Plan. Also, it could be tied into the Integrated Solid Waste Management Plan. So the purpose of this info hearing is to see what Guam EPA is doing to attain these targets, as well as the status of the different programs. So we have the Mayor's Island-Wide Environmental Cleanup Program, the Recycling Stimulus Program. There's also the Zero Waste Grants, which requires regulations. And then there's also the Guam Solid Waste Residential Recycling Program, which basically reimburses Guam Solid Waste for the recycling operations. So at this point, so just to give a bit of an overview, during, I guess, previous terms, there was a waste characterization study that was done. And it highlighted that about 50% of our waste is biodegradable. So we're talking about, paper products, food waste, that sort of thing, can be potentially composted, and that's the reason for that 50% target rate, reduction of waste diversion from the landfill. So at this point, has Guam EPA developed any kind of strategy to get to that point, and how are they utilizing the programs that are currently authorized? So this can go for the administrator or Roland, if you can be able to answer that. Is there anything that the community can look forward to in reducing what's going to our landfill by 50% by 2035? What steps have Guam EPA done at this point?
In regards to food waste, we've not taken any other steps other than the pilot program that we've done with the Hyatt going to the Salvation Army. We're proposing, that they do commercial recycling, but that initiative has not been implemented yet. So we did have the organics composting where we had a training for SWANA, and there are currently 4 composting centers that compost organics. Food waste, on the other hand, is another type of animal. They refuse to take food waste at this time because of the smell. So what we're proposing is that we can get together and do what's called an anaerobic digester, and that would allow us to compost the food waste in a manner that is basically less odorous than it would be done if it was done out of vessel. And that's what we propose to do, is to work on setting up that type of industry.
Okay, so you're doing some studies, or how is that? What's the
Yes,
status?
we've had a number of studies that we did, and basically...
I do recall when you did the Zero Waste Master Plan, right? There was,
right, we did a food waste study and a food waste fact sheet, and the recommendation was to do anaerobic digestion for food waste because of, like I said, the odorous smell of it. We need to work with GSWA if we're going to do something that basically Guam EPA recommends and we regulate, and so we would need an entity that would actually operate that type of system for it to be put into place. And as I said, we don't have the operations, and we did the studies and we've done the recommendations, and that was the main recommendation that came out of the food waste studies. And so if we can divert, mainly if we could do commercial diversion to start with, we would remove a large portion of food waste from the waste stream.
Okay, so how would that work? So would Guam EPA purchase the digester, or would they provide a grant for that? And how much does that cost?
Depending on the size of the digester, it could be anywhere up to $200,000 for a digester. We'd have to work with GSWA in regards to operating it. And so in most areas in the States, these are done through, private entities, where they digest the material, or generally through, from what I've seen, is through universities that take the food waste into account, and they'll use the food waste to either power basically either the university itself, or if it's some type of the landfill, if we work with GSWA, it would be used to power the landfill. Currently, there's an idea that they would use in later times to use the methane gas to power the landfill. And if they can put an anaerobic digester there, it would also be able to create power for GSWA or some other entity.
Okay, and okay, so that seems like a good idea, but I guess it needs a little bit more vetting, and I guess who you're going to collaborate with.
Yeah, we're working on it. Our current staff right now of 4 is focused on our recycling effort both through GSWA and through the MERS program, and the additional staff basically do enforcement and compliance. So we're in a capacity building stage. We said, when we've got hiring that is coming up, and we hope to be able to implement and make recommendations to implement the food waste or diversion program.
Okay, when can we expect the updates on that?
Hopefully by the end of the year.
Unfortunately, our program manager had a recent death in the family, and he would be the best to speak to that. So I will engage with him, and I will get back to you within maybe 2 or 3 months.
Okay, okay. I'll look forward to that. The other thing is the junk vehicles. So we recently passed the bill to streamline the removal of abandoned junk vehicles, and this is part of the recycling revolving fund. So I know there's an important part where DPW, when they remove the vehicle, so basically, has this been implemented, and has DRT already, have they dedicated part of their website? Because that's one of the things that was going to be mandated upon removal, that all the information is going to be posted on DRT website. So do you have any updates on that?
So just like we have a memorandum of agreement with MCOG for the island-wide cleanup program, we have a draft MOA with DPW to collect junk cars using the RRF. That hasn't been signed yet. It's still in draft and under DPW's review. So until they agree to the terms, then we can both sign off on that, and then we can go to our board with an operations plan and an expenditure plan to then implement their efforts in collecting junk vehicles. I do have our financials.
Okay.
So according to the new system, we have $3,223,892.66 in our account. As of January 28th, 2024, revenue of about $846,698.84 came in with an expenditure of $31,249.76.
Okay, and the expenses were for?
I'm going to assume it's part of the MCOG expenditures.
Do you have an itemized listing?
I can get that for you and provide that to you.
Okay, so it's basically for the island-wide environmental cleanup program. What about the recycling stimulus? Do you think that needs to be retooled? Is there any vendor using that?
Okay, I'll answer that.
Yeah, so we're not operating the stimulus program, and no one's come in to apply for that. We have sent funds on a program, and I believe it was $400,000 last year to cover the expenses for the household hazardous waste transfer station down at the at Harmon to supplement their operations. And we intend to do that also this year with an additional $400,000.
Okay, I believe when this was first envisioned, it was supposed to be for things that were shipping off island, other than hazardous waste, right? So, from plastics to, cars, junk vehicles. Is this something that needs to be revisited as far as the stimulus, or, what do you recommend?
Well, for plastics itself, nobody's collecting plastics except for the Guam Solid Waste Authority. And I think one of the things that would stimulate the collection of plastics and the shipping off island is if we initiated the bottle bill that's been without funding since 2012. And so we put together a white plan, we put together an organizational chart, and we also put together a budget and expenditures for that effort. And so far it's still sitting with the legislature for action. That would help us get rid of the plastics on the island. And currently, there's no plastics going out that I know of other than that's going out through GSWA. I mean, there's no money in it for people to do it, so there's no stimulus for them to get it off the island. Metals are going off island, they go through the recycler itself, and the recyclers are taking it for free at this time. So before they were actually charging, and so we were offering them the stimulus to do it. But because now that they're actually making money off of it, they're just taking it for free from all of the residents on island. So they've not requested any stimulus for it. They took all of the washers, dryers, and stoves that we had, that we could bring up them for the typhoon for free.
and they do it on a daily basis. Global recycling. Pyramid had stopped because they were at capacity, but they're starting to move some metals out, and they should start collecting also, and they also take it for free. Basically, the only things that are not taken for free is anything with refrigerants in it. What do you call that? Water coolers, freezers, refrigerators, and they charge for that actually. So that would probably be something. And so out of the MCOG, we've also, through Pyramid, Pyramid had the contract to take the refrigerators, freezers, and what do you call that, water coolers, or even air conditioners. And so we provided money through the MCOG for the collection of those items at Pyramid Recycling. And so because they were at capacity, I'm working with the other vendors to see if we can move the contract, put it out for bid and move the contract to another entity or solid waste processing facility that has the capacity to take that, and then we will initiate that also with the Mayor's Council of Guam.
Okay, so it seems that instead of the recycling stimulus, they're using the mayor's, the island-wide cleanup program instead.
Yes, and so when they collect the different items from the mayor's office, including the refrigerators, because they take basically it for free. It's mainly the transport, and so if the residents take it there for free, if government brings it there, they charge us. So, the money's been used through that program.
Okay, sorry. Did you want to add to that, Administrator?
I just wanted to make a correction that $31,000 in expenditures were actually for salaries. So we track separately what MCOG spends. So that $31,000 actually came out of our current budget, and that was for salaries.
Okay. All right.
I did want to talk about the zero waste grants.
Okay, yes.
So with the local funding, we have not given out any zero waste grants using the RRF, but we did apply for a federal grant under the Solid Waste Infrastructure for Recycling, or the SWIFR grant from USEPA out of bill funding for states and territories. So we did receive $572,065 as our grant award, and then we currently have an MOA, I keep saying MOA, with a nonprofit organization that will do composting and community gardens as part of their work plan. So that MOA is between Guam EPA and Guahan Sustainable Cultures. So that was a pass-through grant to them.
Okay. And do we know how much is going to be diverted from the waste stream?
So we don't have that projections yet. It depends on the amount of participants. But as part of this SWIFR grant, as you stated earlier, and you wanted to see more backyard composting, that's part of the training program of the grant, and also to purchase bins for the participants to do backyard composting. And so we get an idea of how many participants that are actually going to avail themselves of the program, we can give you a better idea how much is potentially going to be diverted.
Okay. Yes, Administrator. Thank you,
So
Roland.
Deputy just mentioned that as part of the grant award, they will do data collection, so that we will have that as soon as they provide that to us when the project starts.
That's good. Yeah, I think overall, is there any metrics program? So we know what's going into the landfill, but the way we know it's effective is we're reducing that amount. So has Guam EPA developed any metrics to basically monitor what's the percentage that's being diverted? Because I know currently recycling is at 30-some%.
36%.
36%. So if we can close that gap to 50%, so what is it going to take to get to that 50%? Yeah, and what are the plans for that?
Well, like I alluded to earlier, a lot of plastic is going into the garbage. If it's not put into the recycling bin, it's put into the garbage. And if that garbage goes into the landfill, then obviously it's not going to be diverted. With the bottle bill, we can potentially remove all of the plastics from Guam, and we've done major, not studies, but we've gone to Hawaii, we've gone to LA. we've seen the difference, and we've also seen the pictures of what Hawaii looked like before they instituted their bottle bill and what it looked like a year later. So that's potentially a big market of diversion that we could utilize if we could actually do that.
So are those plastics being shipped off out of Hawaii, or are they being
They're being
repurposed?
shipped out of Hawaii for recycling.
Okay, so do we have a market? 'Cause I think that
If
was
we
one of the-
pay, we have a market.
Okay, so
That's
that's
the
why
problem
the-
is the shipping. They won't pay for shipping.
Yeah.
If we get it to them, there'll be a market. So
So,
currently in the CNMI, that they have a more robust program, as you might say. And we've been to their recycling center, and they ship it off island. So as long as you pay for the shipping, they will take it. And with the bottle bill in place, the money that we make from that, it will not only give redemption, but it also pay for the shipping of it off island.
So yeah,
and
that's what I
then-
was alluding to, that the recycling stimulus.
Right.
Do you think that could be tied to the shipping incentives, or it has to be completely different?
Well, I believe it's part of the program. The money that the redemption centers make will also help supplement the shipment of the plastics off island. And we could potentially ship not only the plastics off island, but I mean, at this point in time, even the aluminum cans, and if you go and you watch people after they use their aluminum can, they don't take it home and recycle it, they just throw it in the garbage. And so potentially we could also have that done, because it'll be incentive. I mean, some people from in Hawaii, that's basically how they supplement their living, is they just go and collect.
Yeah, so one of the things, I think there's a closing of markets, right, of taking in plastic. So has there been more markets opening up for that?
I believe so, yes, because currently Commonwealth of Northern Marianas is shipping it out and can potentially ship it to the United States for recycling. You know, it's just the cost of shipping is prohibitive, you know, to make any type of money. We pay for the shipment, then we can send it off to recycle.
Do you know what the cost is at this time for shipping off plastics?
I do not know the cost. So basically, the cost for shipping it's either weight or measures. So whichever is greater. If it's bigger than it is heavy, that would be the cost. And there's specific rates. We can find out the shipping rates. It's all set by tariff. And how much would it be to ship out, say, a container full of plastics? And obviously, all of the plastics would be compacted so that we'd fit more space, and it would be more so by weight than by volume.
Yeah. The other thing that the Zero Waste Act does, it also talks about extended producer responsibility. So this idea that rather than trying to recycle, let's limit what's coming in as far as plastic. So that's one of the things that we can promote too, is not using, you know, throwaway bottles, throwaway plastic items. So is that something that EPA is working on as well?
Well,
to limit what's coming in as far as plastics, you know, doing an educational campaign of some sort to reduce plastic consumption? So
we have not done that yet. That is in the works to go ahead and make that program up. I do know that through public law, it was passed to the General Service Agency that all of the government should try and procure things that are less with less packaging and biodegradable or reusable materials. As a educational program, Guam EPA has not initiated extended producer or responsibility or environmentally preferred purchasing this time.
Okay, so those are opportunities, right? So we know recycling is going to cost a lot more than prevention of this type of waste product, which lasts a long, long time in our landfills. So yeah, that would be really great. So I guess I can look forward to updates also from the program manager?
Yes.
Okay. In 3 months, you said?
Yes.
3 months? Okay. And of course, it's a good segue into the plastic bag ban. So I'm still seeing a lot of vendors that are using plastic bags, which I believe they do not receive the exemption. Has Guam EPA enforced this plastic bag ban?
Yes, we have been enforcing the plastic bag ban. Where's my metrics? The Guam EPA, we conducted 354 marketplace inspections in 2021, and we've done 15 this past year. We've received one complaint in regards to the plastic bag ban, and we are currently enforcing the plastic bag ban.
Okay, that's good. Yes, Administrator?
So when I spoke with the solid waste program manager, there is a challenge in the complaints that we get, and he and his team do a thorough investigation of every complaint regarding violations on the plastic bag ban. But there are 11 exemptions. And so when he does conduct inspections at these facilities, there is I guess, justification for the exemption. So it's still difficult to do enforcement with some of those exemptions and the facilities that are allowed to use those exemptions.
Okay, so what needs to be clarified, you think? Do you have recommendations for clarification, either in the law or in how it's enforced?
Well, I can cite one example that he recently had to investigate, which is a wholesale company. So these wholesale companies sell plastic bags. While they look at they look at the businesses that buy these bulk plastic bags, they should be businesses that are allowed to use the exemption, like food service establishments, restaurants, that sort of industry. But they're also retail. So the question is, can someone, layperson walk into that wholesale company and buy 500 bulk plastic bags? And the answer is they can buy the bag because it's not part of a point of sale distribution of those plastic bags. So a layperson like me can go into a wholesale company or that specific wholesale company, buy 500 bags, and whether I'm part of the, or can use that exemption or not, they don't check.
So basically what we've recommended and through all of the wholesalers that we've gone and visited is that you post the actual law at the point of sale for these bags so that, at least they're informed that, you're not allowed to use these bags. And if you're buying them when you're not allowed to use them, then you're in violation of the laws. So that's what we've also tried to push. We can't stop them because we don't know the guys. He doesn't question them, whether, are you going to use it in a restaurant or are you going to use this in a retail establishment? Basically, he said, this is the law, prior to selling it to you, these are the exemptions that you can. If you're not a part of the exemptions, then you're going to use it as, distribution, then you'll be in violation of the laws.
Okay, and as far as, I guess, compliance checks, the businesses that you've informed, they've changed their use, or they've stopped their usage?
Yes, so we basically advise them of that, and if they don't, we advise them of the enforcement actions that we will take. And so we've not had any instances where they refuse to follow the rules or regs, so we have not done any actual enforcement as in fines or anything like that, because they've always complied.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, we're down to the last item, I believe. So used and waste oil. So I believe the last time I checked in, there was some issue with shipping off the used and waste oil. Is there any issues today?
No, there's no issue with shipping off used oil. The issue was with shipping liquid hazardous waste. And so APL has now started to ship out liquid hazardous waste. Matson's still, as part of their shipment rules, will not ship liquid hazardous waste. So APL has taken the helm. We've met with the actual, the previous manager that was there to speak to him about the issue, and so they're shipping it out. Used oil is going out of the island. Currently, Guam Power used to take used oil to burn, and that since we passed the legislature passed the the ban on using high sulfur fuel, all of it's being gone off island. There's two providers that are actually picking up used oil and oily water. That's two private companies. One is Unitec Environmental Guam, which is the largest company. And as part of their permitting, well, we're required to keep records, so we know how much they're shipping out. And I don't know if the office provided you a copy of the current last year's amount that was shipped out. So basically 261,279 gallons of used oil was shipped off by one company, that's Unitec, and oily water was 405,878. And for the other company, which is a little bit smaller company, 36,672 gallons of used oil was shipped off, and 2,087 gallons of oily water was sent off island.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that update. The one thing also I wanted to talk about was the junkyard fires. So how is that? I mean,
So
there's supposed to be
currently,
a
right
limit.
now, the property has undergone a change of ownership. They submitted a cleanup and sampling analysis plan for the property itself. That's being handled by a private company. As for the junkyard fires, as far as the fire department notification to us, it's all consists of arson. And so somebody's going in there and burning the cars. I don't know if it's just just vandals going in there, but it's been on a continuous basis, and they keep burning the parts of the junkyard. It's not even a junkyard anymore, so the property is being cleaned up, and it's going to be used for a different purpose. Those were the remaining cars that were on the yard prior to the property being sold to another individual or another entity. So we do our investigation, but as their fire prevention specialist said, they can't pinpoint who did it, but they know it's arson because they use this accelerant to start the fires.
So is it the tires, or what's causing
Everything
the-
is burning. So
Everything's
basically, when you have a car and you strip the available parts, most of the things that were normally left over are the chairs and the tires, because they're of no use. And so, as part of the process for these junk tires, basically they drain all the oil and everything like that. So it's the plastic, the upholstery, and the tires that are burning.
Yeah, so what is
The
the
metal
limit to how long can a junkyard keep, and the amount? How long can they keep those items on their property?
So there's a difference between a junkyard and a recycler. We do not permit junkyards. Junkyards are licensed through the Department of Revenue and Taxation. So they take the car in and they basically take the parts out. If they do anything to the car as to process it, then they would need a recycling, processing permit. But generally what they do is they strip it and then they leave it there. And so, the claim is that, people are still going to buy these parts because we're a junkyard. And if they start processing the items, then they become a recycler. And so they're not doing that. So we don't regulate junkyards per se. We only regulate solid waste processing facilities. Like you get your Old Bali Steel, where we take the car, they puncture it, cut it into pieces, and then basically compact it and then send it off island for recycling. If it's a junkyard itself, Guam EPA doesn't have any regulations to regulate a junkyard.
So we just recently passed the law that basically identifies junk cars as litter. So there is you guys
Yes.
can regulate litter. So potentially there is that opportunity to regulate junkyards.
Right, but when it comes to the determination of when it becomes a waste, if they're saying that the car still has value in it as parts, then it's not considered litter. If it's on a private property and that's there's nothing doing, then yes, we can enforce that. But when it comes to junkyards itself, licensed junkyards, they're considered value until they become of no value.
Yeah, maybe take a look at the definition again.
We'll look into it,
Yeah.
and I'm sure our program manager will have a good grasp of that. And what enforcement we can and cannot do.
Yeah, because that seems like a gap, because if we're going to have fires, I mean, we're in the middle of potentially a drought, El Nino, right? El Nino's usually triggers a lot of these drier climates or drier conditions.
Yeah, I believe for
this
that
is a
junkyard
cause of
that you're
concern.
speaking of, I think they're more than 50% done in the cleanup. And because of the fires, obviously, the amount of waste on the property was reduced.
Okay, all right. So I think that is the list of items plus additional ones that I wanted to ask. Are there any things that you want to, I know we're in the middle of Earth Month, so this is one of the reasons that inspired me to have this, in addition to a lot of these updates that are needed to ensure that our mandates are being followed and in order to protect the health of our people and environment. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we close?
Just thank you for always supporting us. Certainly, you're an ally and an asset to our agency, so just thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Thank you too, and I do look forward to, making our regulations more stronger in order to protect our people and environment. So thank you for all your hard work as well. But I do look forward to, following up on the permit issue. We definitely want to hold any entity accountable for any kind of contamination. And we're talking long-term contamination too, and on very, very sacred land. So I want to thank you and, for being here today and answering questions. But I do look forward to also seeing any kind of testimonies also for the public. I do want to encourage the public to send in testimonies regarding these rules, the open burden, open detonation, proposed regulations, as well as the PFAS hazardous constituent one. The public comment period is still open. The PFAS one is going to close April 9th. The OBOD will be closing, I believe, in May. So if you have any questions, please reach out to my office. At this time, we are going to adjourn this info hearing. The time is now 11 a.m. Situas Masi.